Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, That Model Railway Guy, and welcome to another review video, this time to take a look at the Rapido Y7, or rather the Northeastern H Class in this particular livery. First off, this review has very kindly been sponsored by Derails. A big thank you to them for supporting the channel, and yeah, this is a model I've been looking forward to for a while. Now, as some of you know, I do some video work here and there for Rapido, and so I've had a bit of a hands-on experience with the Y7 already, but I've been eagerly waiting to get my hands on one for my own layout since they were released. With that said though, I did buy this model myself, it wasn't a freebie from Rapido, and I am going to give you an honest review today, at least as much as I can. As I always say though, you can watch this with the sound off if you just want to see the detail, and don't forget to check out multiple reviews as well if you're thinking about picking up one of these locos, rather than just relying on my video alone. But yeah, let's take a look at this beautiful little model in more detail. So this is the L.N.E.R Y7, or the Northeastern H Class, considering that I have this model in the NER lined green, and this represents number 1310 as it's currently preserved. Inside this model we have a Next 18 decoder socket and a pre-fitted speaker, but that is pretty much it, no firebox LED or stay alive, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. The RRPs for these locos are £144.95, and at the retailers that comes at around £123. This particular version I have here though is a sound-fitted model, which has an RRP of £244.95, and that comes to around £208 at the retailers. So essentially an extra £100 for the sound-fitted version, which considering sound decoders tend to be around about £120 today, that makes it a much better deal if you know you're definitely wanting to go down the sound route. There's no doubt about it though, the Y7 is definitely a diminutive engine, and the proportions of it even give this a slight look of a toy train, even though this was very much a real prototype. While it may look like a toy at first glance though, this model is anything but, and there's loads of detail here to appreciate. The weight isn't terrible considering the small size, it's not as heavy as a big diesel locomotive obviously, but I don't think any of us were expecting that anyway. The outer body shell is entirely plastic I believe, but there is metal on the inside, which is where the weight is coming from. The livery on this model is beautifully done though, with the NER green being particularly striking. Obviously we've got the lettering on the side of the tank there, complete with the nice shading, and yeah, this is printed really well. We've also got plenty of lining on this small model too, not just around the tank here, but down the front as well. And then if we look at the boiler barrel, you can see we've got that similar black and white banding across here too. Again, the printing is really consistent and it looks great across the entire model. You might miss it at first glance, but the wheels actually have some white lining around the outside of the rims on this particular model too, which shows that Rapido have paid attention to the detail here. I do also want to draw your attention to the frame cutouts and the detailing behind the wheels too, which on a model this small is really impressive to see. And also, with the prototype having inside motion, we do have a representation of this which is just visible behind the smoke box. Speaking of the smoke box, let's move around to the front of the model where you can see we've got all the standard features we've come to expect. We've got the chimney, a separately fitted handrail, a lamp brackets, plus the nice NER door dart there too. I will say that the chimney on this model looks a little off-center, probably only by a few millimeters, and it's really only noticeable to me when looking in close-up like this, but I did think I should mention that. Down on the buffer beam we've got some nice white lining around the edges, as well as those little notches on the sides there which I hadn't noticed before. There's also the loco's number printed here, again in that really nice NER lettering, which is great to see considering just how small this area actually is. We also have the vacuum pipe and coupling hook too, which are both represented really nicely too. As you would expect from a premium model, we do have sprung buffers here, which is nice to see. Although, like the chimney, I will say that this one looks a little bit like it's drooping down in comparison to the other one. Again, not a big issue, but noticeable when looking really closely like this. The area that has attracted a lot of attention though is the tension lock couplings. Now, there have been some people out there who have been quite vocal on the lack of NEM pockets on these models, and if we turn the loco over to look at the underside, you can see that we don't have the traditional pockets that we'd usually expect the couplings to fit into. Instead we have this dovetail connection, But I'm afraid that those who are saying this isn't NEM compliant are just misinformed, because this is actually the NEM 363 connection, and in fact most of us have probably come across this before anyway. So this is the standard NEM pocket, a 362 that you would normally fit your couplings into, and you can see we have that same dovetail connector on the back. Okay, so if that's the case, why didn't Rapido just supply normal pockets and couplings with this model? Well, with this pocket and the tension lock coupling fitted to the model, it's fairly easy to see why, as the coupling protrudes quite a long way from the model with all that added extra length. Realistically, I don't think many people would want to have this extra gap, and it's not as simple as moving the dovetail connector backwards either, because you can't do that without affecting the keeper plate or the front axle. Let's not forget that, love it or loathe it, the vast majority of people still use standard tension lock couplings, myself included, so this isn't going to be an issue for most people. For those who do find it a problem, well, there's nothing to stop you fitting a 362 pocket yourself. Yeah, maybe Rapido could have been nice and included an alternate coupling pocket for this in the detail bag, but that's another argument really. From the research I've done, it seems that the NEM 363 design is intended for use where space is restrictive, and that is exactly how it's been used here. And like I said at the start, I know I've done some video work for Rapido in the past, but I'm not trying to make excuses here. I'd say exactly the same if it was any other manufacturer, and really I just think this is a minor issue that has been blown way out of proportion. Stepping down off my soapbox though, I did mention the detail bag a moment ago, and you can see we do get quite a few additional pieces in here. Things like the front steps, little shovels as well, and shunters poles and extra brake rigging, and yeah, this is all contained in a nice resealable bag too, which is very handy if you only want to fit some of these bits and pieces. Looking back along the model towards the cab, we have the safety valve assembly finished off in a nice metallic gold colour. And just beside it, you might miss it at first glance, but we actually have a tiny coal load on top of the tank. Meanwhile, on the cab roof we have the whistle, which I think is a plastic part, and that could potentially be quite delicate. I feel like Hornby originally had small plastic whistles like this on their Peckett, and they discovered quite quickly that they were prone to getting knocked off and swapped to metal ones for later releases. I hope that isn't going to be an issue here for Rapido, but it is worth being careful in this area should you pick up one of these yourself. Of course, an area of interest is the cab, and despite the small size of this loco, most of the versions have an open back, so you can fully appreciate the detailing in here. As we've come to expect from Rapido, this is impeccable, with the pipework and the sight glasses on the back head being a particular standout feature. Looking up from a lower angle, you can see the gauge too, complete with printed numbers and a dial, and yeah, it's nice to see that Rapido have painted the interior walls in this creamy yellow colour as well. We don't get a firebox LED in this model, which is a little bit of a shame, but given the lack of space, both inside the model itself and also from a viewing perspective in the cab, I don't think this is a deal breaker. I'm not sure if you'd ever really be able to see it, especially not if you fit crew to the cab as well. To finish up, down the back we have more of that nice black and white lining that we've seen on the rest of the loco around the edge here. Plus there's the separately fitted lamp bracket, and of course the number printed again really nicely here too. And I think that is just about everything for this tiny model. Considering its small size, Rapido have really packed a lot of detail into this one, and now all we have to do is find out how well it runs. With the Y7 on the rolling road, it's time to find out if the performance of this loco matches the level of detail. As I turn the power up, you can see we have the wheels turning, and the slow speed on this model is actually really nice. The gearing is definitely set up to allow this model to be a really good slow speed shunter, which is exactly what you want from this kind of loco. Running a little bit faster now, you can see it's nice and smooth and generally a really consistent runner all round. I will say though, I have had some issues with the model stalling, both on the rolling road and on the layout itself. I'll talk about this in detail later on though, just because it is more of an issue when I have the sound turned on, and even then it's really only while it's just moving off or slowing down. Once you actually get it going though, this model is a really nice runner. And yeah, this is pretty much the top speed. You're certainly not going to be running any high-speed trains with the Y7, but actually I think this is a really nice speed range. Slowing the Y7 back down then, let's try it in reverse as well. Again, we're getting that nice slow speed here, and like I just said, considering that this loco isn't going to be hauling 12 carriage sets on the main line, I think Rapido have done a really good job at giving this loco decent gearing at the slower speeds. I have noticed when it runs in reverse, it is a bit more noisy than it was when running forwards. It doesn't sound like anything terrible is happening, it's not like anything's grinding or clunking around inside, but I just noticed there was a bit more motor noise in this direction. Although I will say it's not actually loud enough to be heard over the sound decoder when that's on, just to give you some perspective of how loud it is. Speaking of the sound profile though, let's head down to the layout and test out all of the functions on this charming little model. Before we get to the rest of the video, I do just want to say a big thank you to Derails for sponsoring this video today. Obviously they've been long-time supporters of the channel, and many of you guys know I personally use them all the time. In all the years I've been using them, the overwhelming feeling I've got is that Derails really do genuinely care about their customers. One of the things I think that encapsulates this the most is their free postage. You can get free delivery on any order as long as it's over £20, which, yeah, okay, in the world of things like Amazon Prime, it doesn't seem like that special initially, but I don't know of any other model shops that offer free delivery to this extent. With most other retailers, you have to spend well over £100 before you get free postage, and of course with Derails you're getting top-notch service too. So next time you're planning to get some bits and pieces for your layout, or perhaps that new loco that you've had your eye on, well, head over to derails.co.uk or click the link that's down in the description. And in the meantime, thank you so much again to Derails for sponsoring this video.
Little engine, this. Y7. How soon I'll read? What are you doing with that fire? We're not going to King's Cross, you know.
So the Y7 sounds really nice, and it has a decent little speaker inside this tiny loco too, which is really impressive. I did mention earlier though that this loco does have a tendency to stall at the slower speeds when the sound is turned on, and in many ways I do think the Y7 would have benefited from having a stairlive installed. This is just a quick compilation of some of the stalls. I don't normally show these as usually it's quite a rare occurrence, but it did happen several times with the Y7, so I've essentially had to resort to running this in train set mode, which removes a lot of the acceleration and deceleration from the decoder. Otherwise, it just wouldn't go far enough to get up to speed. The frustrating thing is that I know these models can perform well, as I've had hands-on experience with them at Rapido. On screen you should now be seeing some of the footage I shot for their videos of the Y7, shunting around lockdown sidings and on the Rapido test track too, and honestly it was a really nice runner. But yeah, slightly frustrating for me because I know these models can perform really well, but sadly that's just not been my experience with this one, at least when it comes to trying to get the model to start. Certainly when it's up to speed, it's absolutely fine, but when shunting, yeah, it can be a bit tense. To be fair, this loco does have a very short wheelbase and my track laying is far from perfect, but that said, most of my other locos are able to cope with it just fine. I have also spoken to Rapido about this, who suggested cleaning the wheels with IPA, both the tread itself and also the backs as well. I have done that, and so far I haven't seen any noticeable difference, so I do feel like in the future I probably will fit this with a small stairlive, if I can find space for one, just so I don't have to worry about it. What's interesting though is that for Rapido's upcoming 040s like the fireless locomotive and the tiny Porta-Par twins, they are including stairlives built into the loco, and I believe those are included on some of their larger locos too now, like the Stirling Single and the 01 as well. So while it's frustrating that the Y7 doesn't include this feature, Rapido obviously aren't oblivious to the situation, and it's good to see that they've put the work in to be able to include this for future models. Anyway, with that said, I'll let you enjoy the Y7 running around the layout. So yeah, like I said, once you get this model running, it's actually a really nice performer. This diminutive little engine looks right at home on Pitley, and it's fantastic to see it running with this freight train behind it. Complete of course with my custom wagon from Rapido there too. I do think as well that the stalling issues I mentioned earlier are really only something to consider if you're wanting the DCC sound version. Like I said, when I got to play with this model at Rapido before the main release, I didn't experience any issues like this, so it may just be a problem with my model. But again, Rapido are going to include stairlives in their future 040s, so that does show a shift towards negating these kind of problems in the future. While that doesn't necessarily make any difference for the Y7, it does bode well for future releases and shows that Rapido really are trying to maximise everything they can get out of even these smaller models. Returning to the controversial issue of the NEM couplings though, as I said before, I really don't see this as a problem. The vast majority of people stick with the standard tension lock couplings anyway, so it's really only a very small percentage that this affects. And even for those it does affect, you can simply use a coupling with the NEM 363 connector or add the standard 362 pocket instead. But yet, overall the Y7 is such a cute little tank engine, it's hard not to smile as it trundles around the layout. With the rise in popularity of micro shunting layouts, it's easy to see how this model could be perfect for one of those model railways, and especially in the attractive green livery scene here, I can see a lot of these finding homes on people's layouts. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments what your impression of the Y7 is, and if there's any other Rapido releases that you're excited to see in the coming year. In the meantime, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There's lots more model railways to see in the future, but that is going to be it for today. So thank you so much for watching everyone, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!